My name is Clara, and if I'm being honest, I'm not sure how I've made it this far. I've been through more than my fair share of grief, and yet somehow I've kept moving, one step at a time, for my children. I've buried 2 husbands, one to a sudden heart attack when I was young, and the second to a car accident when I was already raising 3 children. I am a double widow, though I hate how that phrase sounds, as if my entire identity could be summed up by the losses I've experienced. But the truth is, I've learned to be strong for them. I had no choice. My first husband, Robert, was a wonderful man, but our marriage was too brief, as it turned out. We had Emily, our firstborn, and I was happy. I poured everything into being her mother, trying to give her everything I could, even if it meant sacrificing parts of myself. I wasn't prepared for his sudden death, but I did the best I could to raise her alone. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt utterly lost. But Emily was always my light, my little girl with a heart of gold. Then came Martin. He wasn't Robert, but in some ways, he was just what I needed at the time. A man who was steady, reliable, and kind. He had a son, Eric, from a previous marriage, and when we married, Emily and Eric became step-siblings. They were 5 years old at the time, both so young, so full of potential. It was a strange dynamic at first. Emily, used to being the only child, suddenly had to share my attention with Eric, who was a bit more reserved and shy. They grew into their roles though, and before long they were inseparable. A year or so after we married, Martin and I had another child together, Samantha. She came into the world with the same fiery spirit that would eventually make her a force to be reckoned with. But in those early days, she was just another little piece of love that I poured my heart into. It was a whirlwind, blending our families together, but somehow it worked. Emily and Eric were close in age, so it felt natural for them to be like siblings, even though there was a difference in blood. They were a team, the way siblings are supposed to be. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing me off balance. I never could have imagined the future that awaited me after Martin's sudden death. It was as if fate had torn my world apart again. Now, I was left not only to raise Emily and Samantha, but Eric, 2 whose own grief was a different kind of burden to carry. Though he was older than Samantha, he was still a child, just as lost as the rest of us. And suddenly, there was no husband to lean on, no partner to share the weight of it all. Just me, alone, trying to keep everything afloat. But somehow, I did. For them, I did. Now, years later, the picture of my family has changed again, and in ways I never could have imagined. My children have grown, as they always do, and though they may not see it, I've done my best to give them every chance at happiness. And though there's a certain pain that lingers from the past, I know that I'm not just a widow or a mother, I'm a survivor. My story, my family's story, continues to unfold, and I only hope it will be a story of resilience, of love, and of finding light, even in the darkest moments. Eric's situation was different from my daughter's, in ways that were both painful and practical. His biological mother had died when he was just a toddler, a tragic loss that left him with no memory of her. His father, Martin, was his world, his only parent. Martin had been an only child, so there were no aunts, no uncles, no other family members left to fill the gaps. Eric had no real ties to the extended family. As much as I appreciated the support my own family had given me over the years, there was no one on Martin's side who could or would take Eric from me. His grandparents had passed away long before we'd met. When Martin and I married, I knew Eric was my responsibility, but I also knew deep down that it was more than just legal responsibility. It was my duty, my love, my promise. I would never, ever let anyone take him from me. And so, after Martin's death, that responsibility fell squarely on my shoulders. When Martin died in that car accident, I felt my world fall apart. It wasn't just the grief of losing him that overwhelmed me, it was the stark, cold reality that I was suddenly alone, with 3 children, 2 of them grieving, and all of us clinging to a fragile sense of normalcy. Emily and Eric, both only 10 at the time, had barely begun to understand what life was without their father. I had legally adopted Eric a few years earlier, so he was legally my son now, but in those early months after Martin's death, it felt like all I had was the title of mother. The title of wife had been ripped away from me so suddenly, it left me hollow. In the wake of the tragedy, I was thrown into survival mode. I had been a stay-at-home mother for most of my adult life, which had given me the luxury of focusing entirely on raising my children. But now, the bills piled up faster than I could process. My savings were gone, drained by funeral costs, and there was no safety net, no cushion to land on. I needed a job, desperately. But what could I do? My years spent at home had left me with few marketable skills, and the job market wasn't kind to someone like me, a woman with no recent work history. But there was no choice. I scoured job listings in a frenzy, sending out resumes with a sense of urgency I had never known before. The idea of not being able to provide for my children terrified me. The days became a blur of job interviews and late-night bill sorting, and I quickly realised just how financially strained we were. With Eric, Emily, and Samantha all growing so fast, I was constantly juggling their needs, particularly their clothing. I had always tried to be practical about expenses, but now, with everything strained, the smallest things became monumental decisions. Eric and Emily were only a year apart in age, and they were both the same size clothing-wise, at least so it seemed simple enough, they should just share clothes. But Eric's wardrobe was another matter entirely. He was a boy, and I had nothing I could hand down to Samantha. At least Emily's old clothes could be passed on to her younger sister, but Eric's clothes would go nowhere. I had no family members to hand them down to. There was no option to reuse them at all, and that stung. As absurd as it might sound, it was a constant reminder of just how out of control everything felt. As the days went on, I would sit at the kitchen table, trying to stretch every dollar, to find creative ways to make sure we had enough food, that I could pay the rent, and that I could keep the lights on. It felt like walking on a tightrope. Every time I thought I had a handle on it, something else would go wrong. Another unexpected cost would pop up. But through it all, I never wavered in my resolve to make sure my children, all three of them, would have everything they needed, even if it meant sacrificing pieces of myself. They didn't need to know that, though. I never let them see my panic. I can't say it wasn't hard because it was. It was unbearably hard. There were moments when I thought I might break under the weight of it all, but I kept going. For Emily, for Samantha, and for Eric. He was my son, no matter what had happened or what the future held. I would do anything to give him a chance, the same as I would for my daughters. And somehow, I managed. Not always gracefully, but I managed. When I first read through Martin's will, I found myself staring at the papers, certain that I had missed something or worse, misread something. It was a mess, to say the least. The words seemed to blur together as I reread the same lines, questioning whether it was a mistake or a deliberate choice. I wondered if perhaps they were just voice dictation errors. Maybe Martin's lawyer hadn't caught them. Maybe they were the result of him not paying close attention in his final months. After all, Martin had been in poor health for some time before the accident. But as I went over the will again and again, I realised these weren't just small mistakes. These were patterns. They were there in nearly every mention of Eric's name. Not once did it say Eric. It was always Erica. In fact, I don't think there was a single case in the entire document where my husband had written Eric's name correctly. At first, I chalked it up to an honest mistake, but as I read more, I felt a strange sinking feeling in my chest. Could this have been intentional? Was there some message buried between the lines? I didn't know. I didn't know if this was what Martin truly wanted. But the more I read, the more I had to accept that these were his words, his wishes, however strange they might seem. I could ignore the typos, or I could choose to believe they were simply that mistakes. But the fact remained, this was the will he left behind. I had no choice but to accept it as his final wish, even if it felt like trying to decipher a riddle with no clear answers. One part of the will that stood out to me, though, was the inheritance. It wasn't just the strange mention of 3 daughters that made me stop in my tracks, it was what that meant for the future. 1/3 of the children's inheritance was to go to Erika, not Eric, and that part hit me hard. There was no indication that Eric had been involved in any of the decisions surrounding the estate, no explanation for why this 1/3 of the inheritance was tied specifically to Erika. The more I thought about it, the more I felt I had no other choice. This wasn't a decision Martin had left up to me lightly. It was as if he had given me a directive, albeit in a form that made little sense. But 1/3 of the estate was earmarked for Erika, and that money would only be accessible if I raised Eric as a girl. There was no way around it. I couldn't ignore what the will said, even though I knew it wasn't what I would have chosen in a perfect world. It felt like an impossible situation, one that I had to navigate carefully, especially with the girls still so young. I thought about asking Martin's lawyer for clarification, but he was already gone, and so I made the decision to raise Eric as Erika. It wasn't just about the money, it was about making sure that my children had what they needed to survive. I had to put aside my own questions and doubts, no matter how much they lingered, and make the best choice I could for all of us. Before I took any further steps, I decided to talk to Emily and Samantha. They were both still too young to really understand the complexities of gender identity, but I wanted to know how they felt. I sat them down and asked if they thought Eric ever felt more like a girl than a boy. I also asked if they would be happier if Eric was Erica, and without hesitation, they both said yes. They didn't know the full weight of what they were agreeing to. To them, it wasn't about gender, it was simply about the idea of having another sister. It would be more fun, they thought. They'd have 3 sisters, not just 2. The concept of Erica wasn't about transitioning in any real way for them, it was more of a fantasy, a way to make their family more like what they imagined it could be. And to them, having another girl to share clothes and secrets with felt exciting and right. In that moment, I knew I had made my decision. I couldn't explain to them all the legal and emotional complexity of what was happening. But I had my answer. The will had set the course, and now it was up to me to follow it. I had to accept it, for better or worse. I would raise Eric as Erica, as strange as it seemed, and I would do so knowing that it was what Martin had written, what he had chosen, and what the inheritance required. The next morning, I sat Eric down at the kitchen table. The weight of what I had to say pressed down on me as I looked into her eyes. It was hard to even know where to begin, so I simply said the words that had been swirling in my mind all night. Eric, I began, my voice trembling slightly. I need to talk to you about something very important. Your dad's will. It said that I'm to raise you as Erica. Eric's face went pale. I could see the immediate shock and confusion in her eyes as she processed the words I had just said. She looked at me, searching my face for any sign that I was joking. But I wasn't. I wasn't capable of that kind of joke. What do you mean, raise me as Erica? Eric's voice was shaky, and I could tell she was already on the verge of tears. I'm Eric. I don't want to be Erika. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, as if the very idea of it was too much to bear. I felt my heart shatter as I saw her reaction. It wasn't what I wanted, either. I never wanted to do this to her, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. I wiped my hands on my jeans, gathering the strength to continue. Eric, sweetheart, I said softly, my voice cracking with emotion. I know this isn't what you want. It breaks my heart to even say this to you, but this is what your dad wrote in his will. I have to do this for you, for all of you. There's inheritance, Eric. Inheritance that would only go to Erica. You wouldn't get it unless I raise you as Erica. The money, it's the only way I can keep us afloat. Her face twisted in confusion, pain, and anger all at once. But I'm not a girl, Mum. I'm a boy. I don't want to be Erika, She cut herself off with a sob, her whole body trembling as she fought to keep it together. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own emotions. I knew this was the hardest thing I would ever do, and I wished more than anything that I didn't have to do it at all. I know you're not a girl, Eric, I said gently. This isn't about changing who you are, but I need to make sure we can keep going. This is about your future, about all of our futures. I'm doing this so you can have everything your dad wanted for you. She stared at me, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I don't want it, Mum. I don't want to be a girl. I don't want to change. Why does it have to be like this? I could barely find the words to answer her. I'm so sorry, Eric. I know this isn't fair, but you have to trust me. I'm doing this because I love you. This is the only way I can provide for you and your sisters. I have to raise you as Erica if you're going to get that inheritance. My voice cracked, and I could feel tears threatening to spill over, but I blinked them away. I had to be strong. For her. For all of them. I took her hand in mine, my grip firm and comforting. Please, sweetheart, I don't want you to go through this alone. I'll be with you every step of the way, okay? We'll do this together. Eric didn't respond, her face crumpling as she tried to hold back the tears. I hated myself for causing her pain, but I had no other choice. Later that day, I gathered Emily and Samantha in the living room. They were so young, so full of wonder and curiosity, and I couldn't hide the situation from them any longer. They were old enough to understand that things were changing, but not old enough to understand all the nuances behind it. Girls, I need to talk to you about something, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. You know how Eric's been struggling since your dad passed away, right? Well, there's something in the will that's going to change things for all of us. Samantha tilted her head, looking up at me with innocent eyes. What do you mean, Mum? What's changing? I glanced at Emily, who was listening intently. I tried to find the right words, not wanting to burden them with too much at once. Well, I said carefully, your dad left an inheritance for you and Eric, but there's something special in the will. It says that the inheritance will go to Erica, not Eric. So I need to raise Eric as a girl. Emily blinked, looking confused. Wait, Eric's going to be a girl now? Like me? I nodded slowly. Yes, honey. Eric is going to be called Erica, and she'll be sharing your clothes from now on. You and Samantha can help her, okay? Samantha's face lit up with excitement, her eyes wide. Oh, that'll be fun. We'll have another sister to share clothes with. Emily nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, I think it'll be so much more fun with another girl in the house. Neither of them seemed to grasp the full weight of what was happening, and maybe that was for the best. To them, it was just another way to have fun, to have another sister to play dress-up with. They didn't understand that this was a sacrifice for Eric, a choice that would forever change her life. But it was necessary, for all of us. I felt a pang of guilt as I looked at Eric, who had silently retreated to her room. I hated that this was happening, but I had no other option. I had made my decision, and I would have to live with it. So would Eric, and so would we all. After the conversation with Eric, now Erica, I had to start making the changes that would ensure she could start living as a girl. I knew it would be difficult, especially for Erica, but the decision had been made. One of the first things I did was rearrange the living situation. It wasn't ideal, but there was no other choice. Erica would now share a room with Emily. Before, Emily and Samantha had shared a room, while Erika had her own space. But now, that room would have to be given up. I knew it would be an adjustment, and I could only hope that the presence of her sisters would help make the transition a little easier. They were young enough to accept the change without too many questions, at least not yet. But for Erica, the change was a sharp and painful reminder of how much her life had been uprooted. Her private space, her clothes, her identity, they were all being stripped away, and it broke my heart to watch her endure it. I took her male clothes, every last one of them, and packed them away, hiding them in a box that I kept in the attic. I couldn't let her have access to them. It wasn't just for practical reasons. It was to reinforce the reality of the decision I'd made. I couldn't afford to raise her as a son and do that while also keeping the inheritance out of reach. I didn't want to, but I had to. It was the only way to make sure that Erica would have the opportunity to access what was rightfully hers, even though it hurt both of us. I bought Erica a couple of dresses, nothing fancy, but just enough to get her started. They weren't exactly what I'd envisioned for her, but they were the most I could reasonably afford. When I handed them to her, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at the dresses with a mix of confusion, sorrow, and anger. She didn't want them. She didn't want anything to do with this new identity I was trying to force on her. "Mum, please," she finally spoke, her voice quiet but filled with a pleading that twisted my heart. "Why are you doing this? Why can't I just wear normal clothes? I don't want to be a girl. I don't want any of this." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "Erica, I know this isn't what you want," I said softly, sitting down beside her. "I know it's hard, but this is the way it has to be. If I don't do this, you won't get the inheritance, and we won't be able to keep going. We won't be able to get by. I need you to trust me." She looked at me with those big, hurt eyes, the same eyes that had once looked to me for comfort and love. Now they seemed full of betrayal and fear. "But I'm not a girl, Mum. You can't make me be one. I don't want this. I want my life back." "I'm not trying to change who you are, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling. "This isn't about who you are. It's about making sure you have everything you need. We're in this together, okay? I promise we'll get through it, but you have to help me. Please." She didn't respond right away. She just stared down at the dresses in her lap, her fingers nervously tugging at the fabric. It was clear that she was in turmoil, torn between the world she knew and the world I was trying to force her into. I wanted to hold her and make everything better, but I couldn't. Not this time. I looked around the room at the bunk beds, at the mismatched furniture, at the small space we were all sharing. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to be enough. I'd have to make it work. For Erica. For all of us. Later that night, after I had tucked the girls into bed, I went to check on Erica. She was sitting in her new bed, her back turned toward the door, her shoulders slumped in resignation. She hadn't put on the dress I'd bought for her, but I knew it would be just a matter of time before I had to insist she wear it. The thought of forcing her to do that twisted something inside of me, but I didn't have a choice. "Erica," I said gently, walking into the room. She didn't look up. "I know you're angry. I know you don't like this. but I'm doing what I think is best for you, for all of us. I know it's hard. It's hard for me too, but we're going to get through this. She still didn't respond, and I could feel the distance between us growing wider, no matter how much I tried to close it. I love you, I added softly, reaching out to touch her shoulder. I'll always love you, no matter what happens. Erica finally turned to face me, her eyes red from crying. I just want to be me, Mum, she whispered. I don't want to be Erica. I don't want to change. I know, I said again, my heart breaking. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do, for the sake of the people we love. We're a family, and we have to stick together. She didn't reply, but I saw the tears welling up in her eyes again. I kissed her forehead gently before standing up and leaving the room. I felt the weight of the decision like an anchor pulling me down. As I walked down the hallway to my own room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, piece by piece. I had hoped the changes would make things easier, but in reality, they were making everything harder for both of us. But what choice did I have? I had to make sure she had the inheritance her father had wanted her to have. It was the only way forward, even if it meant breaking her heart and mine in the process. The next day, I woke up early, my mind racing with everything that needed to be done. I had already decided that Erica's transformation into Erica couldn't just be a matter of clothes and names. It had to be a full transition. I had to make her look the part, not just for the inheritance, but to try to give her the best chance at a life that wouldn't be filled with too much struggle. And so, I took Erica to get her hair done and to have her ears pierced. I could see how nervous she was in the car, her arms folded tightly across her chest as we drove. Her eyes were locked out the window, not really looking at anything in particular, just lost in thought. I didn't blame her. She had no say in this, and now I was asking her to change the way she looked, to make her feel like someone she wasn't ready to be. Mum, please don't make me do this, she said quietly, her voice almost breaking. I don't want to look like a girl. I don't want this. I know, honey, I answered softly, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. But I'm doing this for you, so you'll be able to have the inheritance your dad wanted you to have. We have to make this real. Erica didn't respond, and I could feel the tension building in the car. I hated every moment of it, but I pushed on. I had to. When we arrived at the salon, Erica hesitated at the door, her feet planted firmly on the ground. I gently coaxed her in, reassuring her that we would take it slow. A stylist with a kind face greeted us and led us to a chair. As Erica sat down, she kept her eyes down, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, the stylist said gently. We can start with just a trim, and if you don't like it, we won't go further. Erika shook her head, the weight of her frustration and confusion clear on her face. No, I'll do it, she whispered. I don't understand why it has to be this way. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back my own tears. I had wanted her to have a normal life, to have choices, but now it seemed like all of her choices were slipping through her fingers. As the stylist worked, Erica's long hair slowly transformed into a shorter, more feminine style. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to make her look more like the person I was trying to make her become. Her face remained expressionless throughout the process, and I could tell she wasn't happy. After the haircut was done, I turned to Erica. How do you feel? She shrugged, her voice tight. It's fine. Next came the ear piercings. The piercing studio was busy with women chatting excitedly about their new jewellery, but Erica was silent, her face pale and distant as I led her into the chair. I sat beside her, holding her hand as the piercer cleaned the area and marked the spots for the earrings. You're doing great, I whispered, trying to reassure her. But Erica just stared at the mirror, her eyes empty, her lips pressed together in a thin line. The piercing itself wasn't much, just a brief moment of sharp pain that was quickly over. But I could see the moment it happened, the moment she realised she now had earrings in her ears, forever marking her as Erica. She looked at herself in the mirror, eyes wide, but her face didn't change. There was no excitement, no joy, just a blank expression, like she was somewhere far away. Are you happy? I asked, my voice soft. No, she answered, her tone flat. But I guess that doesn't matter. I didn't know how to respond to that. It was the truth, wasn't it? She wasn't happy. But she would have been just as unhappy living under the poverty line, without any of the opportunities her father had left for her. It was all so complicated, too complicated, for someone her age to understand fully, and maybe even for me to fully accept. We left the salon, and as we got into the car, I could see how much of a shell Erica had become. I had hoped that somehow the changes would feel less oppressive over time, but I couldn't deny how much of a struggle it was. It broke my heart that this was what she had to go through. Later that afternoon, I took Erica to see a doctor, a sympathetic one, who had been recommended by Martin's lawyer. He understood the delicate nature of our situation and agreed to diagnose Erica as transgender, which was essential for securing the Medicaid funding that would cover her hormone replacement therapy down the line. Sitting in that sterile doctor's office, Erica looked even smaller than she had that morning. She sat stiffly in the chair, her hands folded in her lap as she listened to the doctor's questions. It was all formalities, questions about her history, her feelings, and her identity. Erica didn't offer much, answering in short, tight responses. When it was done, the doctor nodded and wrote up the prescription. It was one of the only things I had going for me right now. Medicaid would cover the hurt, and we wouldn't have to face the crushing costs that would have otherwise been impossible for me to afford. But I couldn't help feeling guilty. Was Erica happy as a girl? No, not at all. I could see the sorrow and resentment behind her eyes. She was so angry, so hurt, and yet this was the only way to give her a chance at a future. The inheritance, the life her father had wanted for her, it was the only thing I could give her. Maybe it wasn't fair. Maybe it wasn't what anyone, least of all Erica, wanted. But as much as it broke my heart, I knew this was the only option for her. The hurt would begin, and in a few months, she would start to change, physically, into the person she was now legally required to become. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly as we left the doctor's office. Erica didn't answer me. She just stared straight ahead, her lips pressed tightly together. She wasn't okay, and I couldn't fix it. But I had done what I thought was best, and for better or worse, that was all I could do. As Erica began middle school, everything felt like a whirlwind. She was walking a path that wasn't of her choosing, and while I could see the resentment in her eyes, I also saw a small flicker of uncertainty. She wasn't ready to face this world, and I knew that. But I couldn't leave her to do it alone, so I made sure she had the same schedule as Emily. It was my way of giving her a lifeline, ensuring that someone familiar was always there to guide her, even if it was in the most subtle of ways. Emily didn't understand what Erica was going through, how could she? But I knew that she would try her best to be supportive. She was a girl who had always been outgoing and confident, and I thought that maybe some of that confidence could rub off on Erica, even if she didn't want it. Emily had always been a protector, whether she realised it or not, and I hoped she would step up for her sister in ways that Erica couldn't ask for. I wasn't expecting Erica to open up about her struggles, and I knew Emily might not fully understand, but I trusted that having someone by her side at school would make a world of difference. In the first few months, Erica stayed quiet and withdrawn, avoiding attention whenever she could. She didn't want anyone to look at her, especially the boys. Middle school was a time when everything started to change, and Erica was painfully aware of her transformation into someone she didn't feel like she was. But Emily, in her usual unspoken way, became her defender. Whenever a snide remark was thrown her way or a harsh stare was aimed in her direction, Emily was there sometimes with just a glare, sometimes with a sarcastic quip that sent the bullies running. I'd raised Emily with the same care I had given to Erica. They both learnt the same milestones, even though the context for Erica was different. I'd taught Emily how to put on makeup when she was 12, and now Erica was learning alongside her. Every Sunday afternoon, I'd sit them both down at the vanity in my bedroom, and together they'd practice. I could see the awkwardness in Erica's movements as she fumbled with the brushes and eyeliner. She wasn't natural at it, not like Emily, but I encouraged her. Gentle reminders of how to blend the eyeshadow, how to apply the mascara without making it look clumpy. It was hard for Erica, but I could tell there was a part of her that wanted to get it right, even if she didn't admit it. It was a strange, painful blend of rebellion and acceptance. We also had our girl talks on the weekends, as I'd done with Emily. Those were moments when I would sit them both down and give advice on how to wear heels, how to walk gracefully, how to hold your head up high when everyone around you seemed to be judging you. But with Erica, there was always a layer of tension that wasn't there with Emily. Erica's eyes would avoid mine when I spoke about things like how to ask a boy out or what to do when a crush didn't feel the same way. She wasn't ready for that, no part of her was, and I understood, but I didn't want her to miss out on these moments, even if she resented me for them. Despite everything, Erica began to adapt. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something she wanted, but she started to blend in. She didn't talk much about the other girls at school, but I could tell she was learning. She had a quiet dignity about her as she moved through the hallways, a far cry from the angry, confused girl she had been when we first started this. She still didn't feel right in her own skin, but at least she was surviving. While Erica wasn't yet old enough for hormone replacement therapy, I made sure that the therapist Martin's lawyer had recommended was available to her. Every other week, Erica would go to her sessions, a part of the routine that she hated, but also relied on. The therapist, a calm woman with a soft voice, was the one person Erica would open up to, in ways she never would with me. It was a relief, I suppose, that there was someone guiding her through this part of the process, someone who was a professional and who understood the delicate nature of what Erica was experiencing. Medicaid covered the sessions, so that was one less thing to worry about. But the sessions weren't easy. Erika wasn't the type to talk openly about her feelings. Every time she left the therapist's office, I could see how exhausted she was, both emotionally and physically. It wasn't the kind of transition that came with quick wins or easy answers. It was slow and it was painful, and Erica was forced to grow up in a way she wasn't ready for. I tried to make her life as normal as possible, but there was nothing normal about what she was going through. I did my best to give her a sense of normalcy, even if she couldn't fully embrace it. I knew I couldn't fix everything, but I could ensure that she wasn't left to figure this out on her own. Every day was a battle, both for her and for me. But I held on to the hope that as the years went on, things would become more manageable for her, that maybe, one day, she would feel at home in her own skin, something she couldn't even begin to imagine at that point. By the time Erika reached high school, she had learned how to be a girl. She could navigate the world of teenage girls, how to dress, how to act, how to blend in and survive. She had learnt the basics of makeup, how to walk in heels, how to hold herself with grace, even though it wasn't what she wanted. She had become proficient at doing all the things that were expected of her, the things I had hoped would make her feel at home in her skin. But I could see the truth. Erika didn't want to be a girl. I saw it in the way her eyes would drift to the ground. When we'd talk about anything related to femininity, her voice would soften, and her shoulders would slump as if the weight of being a girl was too much to bear. She had perfected the act for the world, but I knew she wasn't happy. There was a part of her, a deep part, that had never embraced what I had pushed her to become. It was clear she didn't feel like herself, but I also knew that, for better or worse, we had passed a point of no return. The day before her start of hormone replacement therapy was one of the most difficult days of my life as a mother. I had tried to be so careful about everything leading up to it, but there was one decision I needed to make for her future, one last piece of control I could offer her before we moved forward. I had made arrangements for Erica to bank her sperm. She wasn't old enough to fully grasp the importance of what was about to happen, but I couldn't ignore the fact that hurt would render her infertile. I didn't want to rob her of her ability to have children one day. No matter what, I wanted her to have the option of becoming a mother, even if she never chose to take it. The trips to the fertility clinic were awkward, to say the least. I could see the discomfort in Erica's eyes every time I brought it up, her body language pulling tight with embarrassment. The awkwardness of the situation hung in the air like a dense fog. For a girl who had already been through so much, who had been forced to change every part of herself to fit someone else's version of who she should be, the idea of preserving her ability to have biological children seemed like one more painful reminder of what she was losing. The first time we arrived at the clinic, Erika barely looked at me. She couldn't meet my eyes as we walked in, her hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets. I did my best to stay calm, to make her feel as comfortable as possible in an incredibly uncomfortable situation. "Erica," I said gently as we sat in the sterile waiting room, the silence between us heavy. "I know this isn't easy, but this is important. You don't have to decide now, but if you want to have children someday, this is the only way to make sure you still can." She nodded, but her lips were tightly pressed together, and her eyes never met mine. I could feel the tension radiating from her, the way she was shutting herself off from the moment. I didn't blame her, but it didn't make the process any easier. When we were finally called into the office, the doctor was kind but direct, explaining the procedure and the importance of preserving her fertility before she began hurt. The clinical nature of it was almost too much to bear. Erica seemed distant and closed off, her posture stiff as she tried to get through the experience as quickly as possible. I could feel her discomfort, but there was nothing I could do to make it better. I just had to be there, to make sure she didn't face it alone. The whole process took just a few minutes, but it felt like hours to me. Erika barely spoke, and when it was over, she just nodded silently, her eyes still avoiding mine. We left without a word, both of us still processing what had just happened. I tried to reach out, but she pulled away, retreating into the silence that had become so familiar between us. Over the next few months, Erika's emotional walls remained firmly in place. She threw herself into school, focusing on her grades, and trying to stay busy to avoid dealing with the deeper issues. I could tell it wasn't working, though. There was still a hollow, aching emptiness behind her eyes, a sadness that she wasn't ready to confront. I had done what I could to give her a future, even if she couldn't see it yet. But I knew, deep down, that nothing would truly heal her until she was ready to embrace herself for who she really was. And as much as I wanted to help her, there was nothing I could do but wait for that moment, wait for her to accept her own truth. Until then, I would stand by her, as her mother, even in the face of her pain and resistance. The first time I gave Erika her hormone replacement therapy felt surreal. She was sitting in front of me, her back stiff with resistance, but her eyes tired from years of struggle. I had been there for every step, every meeting with the therapist, every uncomfortable appointment, every awkward conversation. But this was different. This was real. This was the beginning of the physical change she'd been waiting for, the irreversible transformation that would shape her body, and maybe even her future. As I held the small vial of hormones in my hand, I felt a mix of anticipation and sorrow. I knew I was doing what was right for her, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision. I had promised myself that I wouldn't force her into this, but now it was happening. I watched as she swallowed hard, her hand trembling ever so slightly. She didn't want to be here, didn't want to go down this road, but she had agreed, and that was all I could ask for. I carefully prepared the injection, the moment feeling like it stretched out forever. She was silent, her face unreadable, her body stiff as I injected the medication. When I finished, there was only a quiet sigh from Erika. She didn't look at me, but she didn't pull away either. She was resigned, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, something that told me this wasn't just a simple act, it was a decision with consequences, and it scared her as much as it scared me. Within a few weeks, the changes began to show. Her body responded to the hormones faster than I expected. Her skin became softer, her face subtly shifting in shape. I watched as her hips widened and her chest began to change. I could tell she wasn't happy about it, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. As much as I had hoped that she could find peace in this process, the changes only seemed to deepen her discomfort. I didn't want this for her, but I had to remind myself that I was doing what was best in the long run, what I believed she needed, even if it wasn't what she wanted. High school came quickly for Erika, and it felt like a whirlwind. With me being a single working mother, I needed stability in my children's schedules, so when Emily decided to join the cheerleading team, I knew that it was just the beginning. Emily was always the social one, the outgoing one, and when she announced she wanted to try out for cheerleading, I was supportive. But the reality hit hard. If Emily was going to do it, Erika would have to follow suit. There was no way around it. I couldn't manage different schedules for each of them, and I certainly couldn't afford the chaos of conflicting extracurriculars. They needed to be synchronized. Erika didn't want to be a cheerleader. She didn't want to be in front of crowds, prancing around in a uniform. But I was already juggling so much as a single mother, and I couldn't afford to make things harder for myself or for her. So, reluctantly, she joined. It was a compromise, a simple equation. Emily had made her choice. Now, Erika had to follow. It wasn't easy, and I could see the strain in Erika's face every time she had to practice. But she did it. She didn't quit. Emily, for her part, had already shown me how much she was willing to give for Erika's sake. She had joined the chess club earlier that year, even though it wasn't her thing. Emily didn't like chess, not one bit, but she did it because Erika was in it, and it kept their schedules the same. It was a fair quid pro quo Emily's way of making sure her sister didn't feel like she was always on the outside. It was subtle, but I saw it. I saw how much Emily cared, how much she was willing to sacrifice. Samantha, the youngest, was the only one whose schedule didn't overlap with the others. I could never quite synchronize her after-school activities with the older two. She had different interests, and her school hours were just different enough to make everything more complicated. But she was younger, and for now, I could still manage her schedule, even if it meant the older girls had to shoulder more of the responsibility. Being a cheerleader wasn't just about practice for Erika. High school rules meant that all cheerleaders had to attend the high school dances whether they wanted to or not. That was the rule, and it meant that Erica would have to dress up and attend the dances like the rest of the team. It was something Erica resented, and it broke my heart to watch her go through it. There was no getting out of it, no negotiating. She had to go. I remember the first dance she stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself in the fancy dress I had managed to buy with what little I could scrape together. The fabric was soft and elegant, but I could see the discomfort in her posture. She looked beautiful, there was no denying that, but it was clear to me that she felt trapped. She pulled the dress away from her body, as though trying to escape the skin she was in. "Mum, do I really have to go?" Erica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't want to do it, didn't want to pretend she was just another cheerleader in a pretty dress, but there was no way out. I sighed, gently adjusting the dress and smoothing the fabric over her shoulders. "Yes, Erica, it's part of the team. You don't have to enjoy it, but you need to be there. For Emily, for yourself." She didn't respond, but I knew she was struggling with the weight of it all. High school wasn't just about friends and fun for Erica, it was about conformity, about being what she wasn't, and what she didn't want to be. But she did it. She went to the dances, and for a few hours she put on a smile and pretended to be just like everyone else. And so, Erika's high school years became a delicate balancing act of pretending to fit in while struggling with her own identity. She was still navigating the fine line between being the girl everyone saw her as and being the person she knew she wasn't. But through all of it, I stood by her, hoping that one day she would find a way to be true to herself without the weight of obligation or expectation. Being a cheerleader forced Erica to become the very thing she hated, the quintessential girly girl. It wasn't just about learning the cheerleading routines or going to the practices. It was about the image, the outward appearance. She had no choice but to embrace the stereotypical femininity that was thrust upon her. As much as Erica tried to resist it, the role came with obligations being polished, always looking perfectly put together, and always fitting the mold of what a cheerleader should be. I could see the frustration building within her, especially as she was forced to wear dresses more often. Her closet slowly started to fill up with frilly dresses, skirts, and blouses. The clothes were beautiful, there was no denying that, but they weren't her. Erica hated them, and it was obvious. She avoided looking at herself in the mirror as she slipped into each new outfit. She didn't feel like herself in them. It felt like she was trapped in someone else's vision of who she was supposed to be. But it wasn't just the clothes, it was everything that came with it. She began to resent putting on makeup every day before school. It became a chore, a daily ritual she had to perform, despite how much she hated it. I remember watching her sit in front of the bathroom mirror, her fingers clumsily applying foundation, mascara, and blush. She would sigh deeply, her eyes barely making contact with her reflection. She wasn't angry at me, she never was, but I could feel her growing disillusionment with the world that had been forced onto her. "You know, you don't have to put on so much," I would sometimes suggest as I passed by, trying to be supportive without pushing her too much. But Erica always looked up at me with those tired eyes, clearly resigned. "Mum, I don't like this. Why do I have to do all of this?" She was frustrated, but she didn't have the strength to fight me anymore. I knew she was doing it because she had to, not because she wanted to. I would smile gently, though I felt the sting of guilt. "You're a cheerleader now, sweetie. This is just part of it. It's temporary." But it wasn't temporary. Not for Erica. This was her reality now. The cheerleader image, the makeup, the dresses, they weren't something she could shed at the end of the day. She had to keep up appearances at all times. And no matter how much she resisted, she was constantly reminded that her role came with expectations I knew she wasn't comfortable with. I watched Erica struggle with it all, day after day. She forced herself to smile at the cheerleading events, at the pep rallies, and at the high school dances where the whole team was required to attend. It wasn't just about being in front of a crowd anymore, it was about performing a role that she had no desire to play. The dress code for cheerleaders meant she couldn't hide in baggy clothes or loose shirts. She had to wear skirts, tight tops, and the whole ensemble. It was as if every day, Erica had to become someone else, someone she wasn't, to fit in. I knew that her discomfort wasn't just about wearing a uniform for cheerleading, it was deeper. It was about the forced conformity of being a girly girl. She didn't want to wear dresses all the time. She didn't want to put on makeup and try to be the perfect picture of feminine grace. But to be part of the cheerleading team, to stay in sync with Emily's schedule and the stability I desperately needed for the three of them, Erica had no choice but to play along. I could see her rebellion in the little things, how she pulled at the hem of her skirt, how she couldn't sit still in her heels, how she kept checking the mirror for any signs of makeup smudging or imperfections. She wasn't comfortable in her own skin, and no matter how much I tried to comfort her, to tell her it would all make sense one day, I knew deep down that it was taking a toll on her. She was caught between trying to live up to an image she wasn't ready to embrace, and the deep longing to be herself, to break free of the role I had put her in. Still, Erika persevered. She did what was required of her, showing up to every practice, every event, every game. But as the days went by, I could feel her growing more distant. I knew she was pulling away emotionally, closing off the parts of herself that she used to share with me. And as much as I wanted to take away the weight she carried, I couldn't. All I could do was remind myself that I was doing what I thought was best, even if Erica couldn't see it that way. The cheerleading uniforms, the makeup, the dances, they were symbols of everything she had to give up. And though she smiled through it all, I knew Erica was just waiting for the day when she could step out of it all and be free to be herself. But for now, she wore the dresses and she wore the makeup because that was the world she had to live in. At 17, Erica had become nearly indistinguishable from the other girls in her high school. Most of her classmates had completely forgotten that she had ever been a boy. Her transformation was complete in the eyes of most people's smooth skin, soft features, and the unmistakable look of a young woman. But despite how much she had changed, there was a part of her that remained unspoken, a bitterness that never fully faded. One day, as I was sitting with her in the living room, she turned to me with a look I hadn't seen before, an expression of frustration, of weariness. The quiet tension that had been building between us for years was suddenly palpable. I could feel the weight of her words before she even spoke them. "Mum," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "What's next? What are you going to take from me next?" My genitals. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just asking out of curiosity. She was asking out of the deep resentment that had been growing within her, the anger and confusion that had built up over the years. She was angry with me, with the decisions I had made for her. I could see it in the way her eyes hardened, the way she clenched her fists as though bracing for something. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. My heart ached for her. I knew that no matter what I said, it wouldn't be enough to undo the years of decisions that had led us here. But I had to try. I had to explain, even if I didn't know if I could make her understand. "No, Erika," I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly. "I would never do that. I would never ask you to have surgery unless it was something you wanted for yourself. This was never about that for me." I paused, trying to find the right words. "Everything I've done, every choice I've made for you, it's because I love you, because I want you to have the financial stability, the inheritance that your father left for you. I want you to be safe. I want you to have a future." She didn't respond right away. Her gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders tense. I could see that my words weren't reaching her, that the years of struggle, of forced changes, had left her feeling hollow and betrayed. She wanted to believe me, but I knew she couldn't. "I never asked for any of this, Mum," Erika finally said, her voice raw with emotion. "I never asked for you to make me into someone I'm not. You took away everything, and now you're telling me it was for my own good?" I felt a pang of guilt, of regret, wash over me. She was right, everything I had done for her had been, because I believed it was for her own well-being, for her future. But I hadn't fully understood the depth of her pain, the way that every decision I made for her chipped away at her sense of self. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. I did what was best. But I know now that I can't fix everything. I can't undo the things I've done, but I can promise you that I'll never ask you to go any further than you're comfortable with." There was a long silence between us, neither of us knowing what to say next. I could feel the rift between us, but I also knew that in time, she might come to understand my choices. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe there would always be a part of her that resented me for what I had done, for what I had forced her to become. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain: I loved her. I loved her more than anything in this world, even if she couldn't see it right now. And I would always be there for her, no matter what. As I sat there, watching Erika struggle with the weight of her emotions, I knew there was one truth that could not be undone. The life she was living, the path she had walked, was already affirmation enough. She had become Erika in every sense of the word, whether she wanted to admit it or not. From the way she carried herself, to the way she interacted with the world. She was Erica now. She couldn't erase the transformation. Not now, not after all these years. I reached out and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. Erica, I said softly, I love you just as much as I love Emily and Samantha. You are my daughter, and that will never change. No matter what you feel or what you think about everything that's happened, you are loved. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. I could see the internal battle she was facing, the girl she was becoming, and the boy she once was, locked in a fight within her. She had spent so many years fighting to understand what had happened to her, to reconcile the life she had been forced into with the one she felt was supposed to be hers. I know this is hard, I continued, my voice steady. I know you didn't choose any of this, but the truth is, you've already become Erica. The way you live, the way you present yourself, those are decisions you've made, whether consciously or not. Erica shifted uncomfortably, but I could see that my words were starting to sink in. She didn't want to hear it, but there was no escaping the truth of it. She had embraced the life I had created for her, even if she didn't agree with the reasons behind it. Doesn't that count for something? I asked, trying to gently make her see the reality. You've lived this way. You've grown into this person. And I want you to know that I love you for who you are, no matter what. Erica's face tightened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. I could feel her pushing back, unwilling to accept the reality I was offering. I don't even know who I am anymore, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to be Erica. I let out a quiet sigh, knowing how hard this was for her, knowing how many layers of confusion and hurt she was carrying. I know, sweetie, I know, but that doesn't change the fact that you are Erica now. You've become this person, and I love you no less for it. I will always love you. I paused, watching her struggle with that truth, the weight of it pressing down on her. The only thing I won't let you do, Erica, I said gently, my voice steady but firm, is be Eric again. You can't go back. You've come too far. But that doesn't mean I don't love you, and it doesn't mean you don't have a future ahead of you. Erica's lips trembled slightly, and she turned her head away, as though trying to avoid the reality of my words. She didn't want to hear that she couldn't go back, but I couldn't let her slip into that false hope. She had lived as Erica for too long, and despite how much she resisted it, she could not erase the path she had walked. The room was quiet for a long while, with only the sound of our breathing filling the space between us. I could feel the emotional distance between us, but I hoped, deep down, that she would come to understand one day. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know if she would ever forgive me, or if she would ever fully accept the choices I had made for her. But I did know one thing for sure. I loved her. I would always love her. And no matter what, she would always be my daughter. By the time Erica graduated from high school, the changes were undeniable. She had become the young woman I had raised her to be. And, though it had been a struggle for her, she had made it through to the other side. But even though she had completed one phase of her life, I knew there were more hurdles ahead for her, more challenges that lay beyond high school. Erica got into the same college as Emily, an ironic twist of fate, considering how much I had pushed them both into shared activities throughout their lives. Emily, being the naturally social one, had made friends quickly, and Erica had reluctantly followed along, forced to take part in things that, frankly, she would have preferred to avoid. But somehow, through it all, they had grown closer. Emily's cheerful nature had rubbed off on Erica, even if she never fully embraced it. They were like two halves of a whole, joined at the hip in a way that only sisters could understand, even if their bond had been built on circumstances neither of them had chosen. The decision for them to attend the same college wasn't an accident. I had to consider practicality. As a single mother working to support 3 kids, I had to make sure the finances would work. With the costs of tuition, housing, and other expenses, the most logical solution was for Erica and Emily to live together. It was the same reasoning that had driven my choices for them growing up sharing clothes, sharing space, keeping things as economical as possible. And so, despite everything that had happened, despite Erica's resentment and bitterness over the years, she was still sharing a room with Emily. As much as Erica wanted to break free from the confines of her past, she still found herself in the same situation wearing Emily's clothes, sleeping in the same room, just like when they were younger. It felt like a subtle, almost poetic callback to the very beginning of Erica's journey, when she had first started wearing Emily's hand-me-downs. She hadn't been able to escape that cycle, even as an adult. "Mum, I'm an adult now," Erica had said to me, Just before they moved into the dorms, her voice tinged with frustration. I don't need to share everything with her anymore, but I couldn't help but feel that this was just another part of Erica's journey. I never imagined it would be this way for her, that she would still have to rely on Emily in this way. But life doesn't always work out how we plan. Sweetie, I said, holding her gaze, it's just until we get settled. You two will have your own places soon enough, I promise. It was hard for her to accept, I could see that. But I also knew that, as always, the practicality of life would take precedence over everything else. They had grown up sharing a lot, and that didn't stop when they went off to college. Despite everything, though, there was a quiet kind of understanding between them, an unspoken bond that had been forged through the years. Emily still saw Erica as her sister, the same way she had when they were little, even if Erica sometimes resented it. And for all the things Erica might have wanted to change, it was clear that deep down, she hadn't fully lost her connection to her family. I knew that the journey wasn't over. Erica's future was still uncertain, still unfolding before her, but for now, she had made it this far. College was a new chapter, and I prayed that she would find a way to make peace with the life I had shaped for her. One thing I was sure of, she was resilient, even if she didn't always see it. And no matter what, I would always be here for her, just as I had been since the moment she came into my life. If I were doing this with a mean spirit, I would have forced Erica to undergo gender affirmation surgery, taken away the last remnants of Eric, but I couldn't bring myself to do that. I knew, deep down, that Eric was always inside Erica. He hadn't disappeared, not entirely. But if the world saw her as Eric, if anyone ever learnt the truth, she would lose her inheritance. There would be no money for college, no future that she could rely on to carry her through life. I didn't want that for her. No, I couldn't let her face that kind of struggle when I knew I could protect her from it. Erica had already passed as a woman she was convincing enough to satisfy the lawyers, to keep the legal details in order. If I were cruel, I could have pushed her further, forced her to become what others expected, but I had always done what I thought was best for her. And what was best, at this point, was leaving her some semblance of her past. Taking more of her away felt like a betrayal of the love I had for her. It would have been inconsistent with everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for. She had been through enough, and I didn't want to be the one to strip away the last shred of who she had once been. Eric was part of her, he always would be. But I needed to protect her future, and to do that, I had to hold on to the things that made her Erica. I couldn't let the world's definition of her be her downfall. As Erica became a college-educated woman, I knew she would never have had the opportunity had I not made the choices I did. The inheritance, the college funds, everything those were things Eric would never have had. Erica had a future, and I had given it to her. She was growing into a woman with a career ahead of her, one she might have chosen for herself, even if she resented the way she got here. It wasn't the life she would have chosen, but it was the life she had now, and I could only hope that one day she would look back and see that everything I did for her. I would always love Erica as my daughter. That would never change. But I often wondered if her love for me as a mother had faded. Would she ever forgive me for what I had done to her, for shaping her life in ways she never asked for, never wanted? I couldn't know the answer. All I could do was wait and hope that, despite everything, the love I had shown her would still matter in the end.